Hey everyone, welcome to the Walk to Wealth podcast. If you're tuning in on YouTube or any of the podcast directories, make sure to follow so you can never miss a beat. We're keeping on bringing amazing guests this new year. So without further ado, Elizabeth, tell us about yourself. Who are you and what do you do?
My name is Elizabeth Pampalone. I own Absolute Marketing, and we create 1 year of marketing content in 5 days.
Amazing. And Elizabeth, let's dive right into your walk to wealth. I think a great place to start it is, were you an entrepreneur growing up? And if you were, or if you weren't, what kind of led you into the entrepreneurship world? What was kind of like that shift that kind of changed everything in your mind?
Well, my grandfather and my mom were both entrepreneurs. My grandfather started a consulting company, and then my mom had some part time businesses that she owned. And from there, I just kind of saw it as a natural thing I could do. And once I got my degree in programming, I decided to go into computer repair. I started a business in that about 15 years ago. And then I kind of quickly used my actual degree in programming and started into the marketing side of things, which is what I do now.
That's amazing. And let me ask you, what was money like growing up in your household? With you having some entrepreneur experience from your mother and as well from your grandparents? What was it like kind of growing up in a somewhat like entrepreneurial family?
Well, my dad was the mainly the sole income earner. So when my mom did have those part-time businesses, that was when we actually got to do the extra stuff.
Mhm.
Otherwise, it was kind of normal middle class, one income household with
Yeah.
5 kids. So not always a ton of extra to go around. But when my mom did have those jobs, that's when we took those vacations and we had bigger Christmases or whatever. So it was interesting to see that even though my dad was the main income earner, that my mom was the one who brought in kind of the extra fun stuff.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. Let me ask you before we get into today's conversation, what was that sibling rivalry like? Were your siblings also entrepreneurs, kind of? Or you guys have like little contests as who could sell the most candies or anything like that? What was it like in a household of five? Are you the oldest, the youngest, middle child?
So I'm the oldest, and none of my other siblings actually went to the entrepreneurial route. One of my youngest, the one who's the youngest right now, she actually has just started into that and she's 22. So she's kind of just now dabbling into that. But my other siblings have all tried entrepreneurial efforts
Hmm.
and they've just realized that it's not their thing. And so I'm kind of the odd one out in that regard. And I've had my business for 15 years. So definitely one
Hmm.
of those things that you do have to persevere at. And sometimes people just realize it's not their thing, and that's okay too.
Yeah, and so let me ask you too. When you were in college, is this something this the marketing side of things? Is this something that you kind of had a knack for and you kind of just suppressed a little bit? Did you always have a feeling you might end up in marketing, but were kind of undecided? Or is this something that just kind of you picked up once you got out of school?
So I've always done a lot of marketing just in general. I always had to market to my siblings to do things they
Hmm.
didn't want to do.
Yeah.
And so I kind of agree with, I think it's Chris Vaughn who says that you're always selling something, whether you're trying to convince your spouse to go to dinner or you're always selling somebody something, even if it's familial. And so the reason I actually went into programming was that my parents were not convinced that it was going to be a good job. So I went to the library and got a book that told you what the salaries of those jobs were because you couldn't look it up on the internet in those days. It wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
And so I got the book and it said that you could make quite a bit of decent money compared, according to my parents, being a programmer versus being a designer. So even though a designer is what I had more of a knack for, I did end up kind of going the harder route and taking the programming course. And I was one of two women that actually finished the actual degree in that year from my class. And it was a very big accomplishment for me. But at the same time, it gave me this left brain, right brain ability to talk to people in the technical world, know technical things, do technical things, but also knowing that I had this kind of creative side and marketing side as well. So it really allowed me to do a lot more things than some of my counterparts who just went into design.
Yeah, a question just popped up that I'm kind of curious about. I know we're kind of stalling a little bit, but a question that I think is well worth the ask. And do you feel as if part of your why, at least earlier on in your career, was trying to prove your parents wrong that you could actually make something out of what you have going on? Is that something that kind of compelled you to keep pushing forward? Was there like their approval? Because as I said, you looked up in the book, how much money could be made. So clearly, what they said, you wanted to prove them wrong somehow a little bit. So how much of a factor did that play of a factor? Do you realize it played a factor, or am I entirely off the mark?
Well, I think it played somewhat of a factor. When I showed them what the amount that you could make as a programmer, they said, "Okay, you can do that." It was kind of more of a permission thing at that point.
Mm,
And I ended up paying for all of my entire college education myself as I went. So
jeez.
I worked and paid for it. And I lived at their house, so I kind of still needed their approval in some ways.
Mm,
And so when I graduated with that, I did go into a programming job. They were very happy with that. A couple of things happened in my life. I went through a marriage and a divorce very quickly. And then we moved across the country, the family. And so I really had to start over at the age of like 22, 21 years old. And at that point, I knew that I didn't want to go back into programming. It was very soul sucking for me. I couldn't stay in that like little cubicle all the time and just be at a computer. And so when I decided to not do that, my mom basically encouraged me and said, "You're going to have to just pick two things you actually like doing. And you're going to have to make a job because you're unqualified over here. You're overqualified over there. None of the jobs I applied for I could get and that would make me any kind of living wage at that time, especially during the recession and the housing bubble in 2007. So it was kind of more of a my parents, they encouraged me to do the programming thing, but then when it kind of turned out that I didn't want to do that, there was a way for me to still use the knowledge I had and the technical knowledge that I had learned, but in a different way. And so they really encouraged that.
that's amazing. So let's get right into it because entrepreneurship, it's something that a lot of people want to get into. A lot of people don't find success in. A lot of people figure out very early on that, hey, this is not something that I really want to pursue. And although the end goals of a successful entrepreneurial endeavor are something that a lot of people strive and desire, the journey along the way kind of is what thumps them. So let me ask you, right? Because this is something that you specialize in. Right. When starting a business, where on earth do we start? There's so many different avenues we can go down, so many different rabbit holes. You can start looking into copywriting and advertising and all this jibber jabber. And there's so many things we could get into that will just lead us into more rabbit holes and end up actually never starting the business, but have all this information. So if I were to start a business today, I'm brand new. I'm maybe still in college, fresh out of college, wherever I may be. But let's say I wanted to start a business, no entrepreneurial experience. Where do I begin?
Well, I actually like to begin with branding. And part of that is actually finishing and completing a one-page business plan. So I have a one-page business plan as part of my free library on my website that I built and created just to allow people to vet an idea. So a lot of times people will have an idea for a business, they'll have this amazing idea, they'll think it's the greatest thing in the world, but they don't actually know if it can make money, if it can be sold, if there's an audience for it. They don't even know some of the other factors like why they're doing it, who their audience is, what their mission is, what their goal is. And then, of course, again, like I said, can it actually make money? And so, this one page business plan that I created, and there's tons of them out there, you can find them online for free. If you can fill that in all the way completely, you're going to have by the end of that 20, 30 minutes, maybe an hour filling it out. You're going to have your mission, your vision, your marketing, your target audience for your marketing, what kind of marketing you should do, because it kind of asks you some questions. It's kind of a fill in the blank thing.
Hmm.
And then at the bottom, it asks you, can you break even? Which means, can you do this job and not be losing money every day, every sale,
Mm.
and still pay for your bills and your housing and your food and as a person who needs to live off of the business? So I really like to start there to let's say, let's vet this idea first. And then once you do that, you've kind of got some of these little pieces going. Then you can start in on branding, website, social media, and things like that.
So let me ask you, right? Let's say I got an idea. I want to do, I don't know, let's say a tie business, right? I want to sell ties because I like ties. What are the kind of questions that you ask people when trying to pre-sell that idea to the marketplace, assess it out into the waters and make sure this is something that's viable, something that people actually want and need or and are looking for and also are willing to pay for as well? Like, what are some of these questions that you ask when you're trying to pre-sell this idea to people and see if they'll be on board with
Yeah, and I think the easiest way to say that is what do you do?
it?
Who are
Hmm.
you sharing it with? And where are you going to share it? How are you going to actually get it out there? And so if you know what it is you're doing, you want to sell ties. Okay. Are they custom ties? Are you getting them manufactured? Are you purchasing them from somewhere else? Are you going to these shows to like these clothing buyers? They go to shows, they buy clothing, they bring it back to their local area. Are you going to make them yourself? Are you going to be able to source the right materials? How much do those materials cost? How much does it cost to make or purchase one tie? And how much are you then going to in turn sell it for? And so some of those things are what we find on most one page business plans that kind of help you suss out some of those ideas and some of those things that Oh, I don't know how much the thread is. I don't know if I need a sewing machine or not. And so maybe I'm just going to purchase them. Well, where am I going to get them? Are they coming from China? What if there's supply chain issues? So there's a lot of those kinds of things that go into just even vetting an idea, just so that you have a very basic foundation. And then you can start to build a brand and actually market this idea that you have. So, especially when doing a physical product, you definitely have to prototype it out and know the cost of every single little piece. Like there's some of these shows on TV that are old now, but like the food truck shows where they say, okay, how much do these fries cost? Okay, well, we're going to sell them for $3.95 for these cheese fries. And they're selling them out of this food truck, but there's a paper cup that's involved. There's the frying oil. There's the receipt tape that they get when, the person gets their receipt. There's so many little pieces that go into this one thing. What about the napkin? What about the fork that person gets with every single fry sale? And so if they know that that paper cup is 20 cents and that plastic fork is 11 cents, if they know all those things, they can actually tell whether they're going to make money on those cheese
Mhm.
fries or not. Because if those cheese fries actually cost you $3.85, you're making 10 cents a fry. That's not really worth it, you know?
Yeah, so let me ask you, right? Because you mentioned break even. And I hear so many stories in entrepreneurship of people that the first 6 months, first year, they made like no money. They're in the red. And then they come out of that though. And I mean, sometimes they don't come out of it, but sometimes the one that do, they come out of it and then that's when they skyrocket and propelling into the stratosphere. But for that, whatever, whether it's the first week or first 6 months or for whatever time period, usually
Yeah.
like, because you have to invest some type of capital first before, especially with like a product, not like it's a coaching business will say, hey, I'm coaching now. That is like not that much overhead, but with
Right.
a product or something like that, a lot of the time you're investing a lot into it before you ever get something back. So what's your kind of thoughts there? Because you mentioned earlier that we should at least be able to break even while we're still in the idea stage and the pre-selling stage.
Yeah. So the break even just says that when I sell 200 of this item, that amount is not only going to pay for all my overhead, all my costs, all my labor, all of the actual like in-house things that business needs to run. It's going to buy
Mm,
the fries and pay for the truck to run and buy the paper cups and all that. But it's also going to then make enough money to pay you, the owner, for living in your house. What's your monthly mortgage payment? What's your car payment? What's your insurance payment on the car? What's your cell phone bill? All your internet, all those things you pay for on a daily basis. Even if you're living like bare bones minimum, like eating ramen every day, you got to be able to pay for not only the business to run, but also your life to run. And so that's what that break even point is. You may not actually quote unquote make money because you as an employee of the business are a person who's being paid a salary, and that's a business expense essentially.
mhm,
But basically, if you can't pay for both of those things at the same time by just the business running and being up and running by itself, then you are going to have to influx some capital, whether that's some VC capital or you're going to get angel funding or the family member is going to loan you some money or gift you some money. But that just kind of gives you the idea that my product is viable enough that if I did sell 200 of these in 1 month, I'm good. I would be able to pay for everything. And maybe the business would even have a little bit left over at the end. But
yeah.
if you can't sell, if you're selling 200 and you're still not making enough money, but you know that there's no way you could sell more than 200 in 1 month, there's just no physical space time way you could do that, then your
Yeah.
product either isn't expensive enough or your costs are too high for the type of product you're selling. So there's lots of little variables that can be adjusted, or maybe you're living in too expensive of an apartment and you're going to have to get roommates or something, right?
Yeah.
And so you have to just look at those costs. And so that break even number is more, can I live off of this if it were to go well? And if it doesn't go well, can I sustain it until it does?
That's an amazing point. And you mentioned about funding. You mentioned venture capital a little bit. For anyone that doesn't know about funding or what that looks like or what that even is, can you give us like a brief description of what that is? Because a lot of times we don't even know that this is an option that we have available to us.
Yeah, if you have a really good idea, it has to be really good.
Yeah.
And you also have to have come through some kind of vetting process where you can show there is a market for this. I can make money off of this. And I can possibly even get you your money back if you do invest in me. That's when you can go to angel investors, venture capitalists. There's even some contests. I'm working with a client right now who is running contests for small businesses to allow them to pitch to high powered investors who want to invest in these amazing tiny little companies that are just doing something so awesome. But
Yeah.
this company that I'm working with, they actually help people pitch that, because that's a hard thing to do, is to get the right pitch and to have the right prototype and all that. Getting to that point is sometimes even a struggle. So definitely there's options out there. There's tons of things like SBA loans and there's veteran loans you can get if you're through the VA. There are actual agricultural loans that you can get even if you live in sort of a rural area.
Mhm.
Even though it might not seem rural to you, it actually technically would be a rural area, and there's loans you can get through that. So there's lots of options for those things. But what I try to do is say, as long as you can bootstrap it as far as you can, because what some of those things do, especially with the venture capitalism, think of Shark Tank, they're going to take part of your business from you. They're going to want something back. Angel
Mm.
investors don't always want something back, but at the same time, their funds aren't limitless either. So you do have to kind of pay attention to some of those things, that if you do give away 5, 10, 15, 50% of your company, that you will be losing part of your identity, and you'll essentially, some people end up basically having a job in their own business.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're not going to do. And I kind of want to ask you, and I think this would be a great segue. And so you mentioned the branding earlier, and you mentioned fries and cheese fries and selling it for 3.95. But you go to a food truck made by 3.95, but you go to Yankee Stadium, those same fries will cost you like $15, right?
Yep.
And it's all about location, but it's part of the brand, right? The same
Yes.
pair of slippers, you throw a Yeezy symbol on it. Well, at least before everything, but
Yeah.
same slippers you would get for like like $20 at Marshall's, you get for almost $400, and people are selling them. And it's like, so it's like all about too, like that brand behind it. So how does one start to kind of build that? Of course, it might not get to the Yankee Stadium brand or Louis Vuitton or kind of these brands, but starting off is like, how do you develop that brand? So you can, I guess, ask for what you're worth, not have to discount yourself to try and be the lowest price offer. Like, how do you build that brand, whatever it may, whether it's a luxury brand or, whatever kind of brand it is, where does one begin with?
Well, you want to really create an experience. That's really what I think the main part of a brand is creating an experience. Because a lot of people will say, okay, I want a logo. It looks great. I want these colors. They mean something to me or whatever. But that's just a tiny, tiny little part of your brand. Your brand has a lot to do with your why. It has a lot to do with the background of the company, why you're starting this, who it's for, and then how you actually share it. So, for example, I've worked with a lot of jewelers, and they design their showrooms very, very carefully. They are very thoughtful about the type of chairs, the fabric that's in the curtains. Like, they want it to be very, very specific. The type of lighting that's in the case. If you actually go to Tiffany's, you'll see this really, really set up really nice. You're going to see chandeliers. You're going to see this luxury idea, right? It's when you walk in, there's a security guard. He's just standing
Yeah.
there in his suit with his little earpiece. And that just makes you think, oh my gosh, I'm in a place that deserves reverence, right? And they have this special revolving door, and it just means luxury when you walk in there, and you know that you're going to spend a lot of money when you go in there, but
Mm.
also you know you're going to get something of high value and high quality. And so that's this kind of luxury experience that they're giving you when you actually walk in a physical space. And so what we need to do is take that idea and wrap it around every single thing that we create, every single brand that we create. And if we have a luxury idea, think of how you would portray that in a store, or how you would present that when you're with that person. Maybe it's just a coaching business, like we talked about earlier, and there's no physical product, there is no physical location, but there's an experience you want somebody to have and some kind of transformation you want them to go through when they're coaching with you, right? And so that is how we want to write all that down. We want to put it into words if we can. And from there, we can take that, and that's what informs our brand. It informs our colors. It informs the images that we use, the stock photos that we use, the branding
Mm.
photos that we get taken by a photographer. All of that is that experience we're trying to create. And once you have that and it's written up, then you can create a website really easily. You can create your social media super fast, because all of the other things connect to the brand. So as long as you get that experience right and you can verbalize it and communicate it in a in a written form, in a verbal form, maybe it's a video, maybe it's in a physical form like a storefront, then you can take all of those pieces that you've had that experience and put them into everything else that you do.
Yeah, so let me ask you, I think a pretty difficult question to answer. When it comes to brand, if you ask someone, one of your customers, they might say one thing, right? Some people might say Nike, they're for athletes that love all the athletic gear. Another person might say, Nike, I wear them to be fashionable, right? Which is two kind of totally different things, right? Totally different, I guess, brands you could kind of say. But like, how do you, especially when starting off, they're in a lot bigger scale, so they can do that and get away with it. But usually when you're starting off, confusion leads to people saying no, right?
Yeah.
So how do you get people kinda to be able to understand your brain? And how do you articulate it? How do you get that to come across? Because writing it down and saying it is one thing, but just because you say it doesn't mean people are gonna interpret it in the way that you want it to be interpreted. So how do you get your customers on page with, like, the brand and make sure you deliver that experience so that people all say the same thing? Like, John, he's a great podcaster. Not, "Oh, John," like, for me right now, it's like I built this brand of being in real estate, and now my podcast is my main focus. So now I'm kind of like rebranding and
Yeah.
right now. So it's like you ask one guy, I'm a basketball player, football player. You ask another guy, I'm a podcast host. You ask another guy, John's in real estate. So I'm kind of rebranding right now. But for someone that hasn't built any brand yet, how do you get them to articulate that and get them to understand what their brand is, not just have it written down on a piece of paper or recorded on a video?
So it goes back to knowing who you're for and knowing who you're not for. And in the beginning, you really have to niche down. You really have to say, this is my audience. And it could be a small sector of people. It doesn't have to be every single person in the world like Nike is trying to get, right?
Yeah.
So they actually say they're for every athlete, for every body. That's what one of their taglines is. And so they're really trying to reach a broad audience now, right? And because they can, like you said, they can go multiple different directions and not really lose their steam or lose their funding or whatever because they have kind of an unlimited supply of everything. But when you're a small business and you're starting, you have to say, this is who I'm for and this is who I'm not for. And then to get people to understand that rather than, like you said, just having it written down, because that's just the first stage, you have to build a website that portrays that this is who I'm for. If it's not, you go away.
Yeah.
And you have to build your social media to say the same thing because that's going to attract those people to you versus and repel the people that aren't for you. And it's going to help you build this like really strong base. And then the main thing to get people to tell you that you're a podcaster, John, not a real estate guy or a
Yeah.
basketball guy, is to be consistent. And that means that, so when I changed from having a computer repair company to owning a marketing company, I had to tell people every single day, I own a marketing company. And they say, well, I thought you were doing computer repair. And I said, yeah, that's one of the businesses I own, but I own a marketing company. So
Yeah.
every single day I was telling people, physically telling them, but also in social media, on my website, through email marketing, through podcasting, this is what I do. And this is who I am. And through that consistency, for the last 6 years, I've been doing the same thing. I've been doing the 5-day sessions, in a day stuff, the power days. But before that, I did other things. And so people knew
Yeah.
me as other things. And now it doesn't matter. They all know this is what I do because of the consistency.
Yeah, no, I love that you mentioned that, and a lot of the times people, I hear the saying of, "Oh, you're telling me to repel other people, like to push people away," and it's like, yes, push people away because you want your base, as you mentioned, to be your ideal avatar, your ideal client, whatever that may be, and by repelling other people away, eventually those people will come back. For example, for me, like my show's on building wealth, right, and I'm targeting specifically young adults, and all my branding and stuff like that. It's like, hey, I'm doing this for young people. But of course, anyone can start building wealth. So I'm gonna attract people secondarily. But as you
Yes.
mentioned, all my messaging and stuff like that is like, hey, I help young adults. And for me right now, it's like I'm at a point where all my bios and stuff like that were written to kind of showcase like all that I'm doing. So like probably by the time this episode drops, I'm actually gonna have to redo all my bios. So it's like specific on like the podcast,
Yeah.
and it mentions all the stuff that I did to show that I have some, I guess, some experience in other areas. But like for me, I wanted to highlight specifically like, hey, this is the podcast, this is what I got going on, and things like that, and just getting that message across now. Like I've been like very subtle with it, but I'm on my Instagrams and my posts and on Facebook and things like that. It's slowly but surely starting to convert to more podcast related things. I changed my bio I changed my call to action link that I have on my IG and things like that. And I've been making it kind of subtle, like slowly making changes so that as I make an actual announcement, it's like, oh, I kind of seen this coming for a little while now. And I kind of want to ask you to keep on the conversation going a little bit. Now that we kind of built up this brand, where do we go from there? A lot of people say you have to go to social media route. Some people say you have to start a website. Which one would you rather prefer to go someone to go down? Where do we begin?
I like people to go to a website next. It's because there's a lot of explaining you have to do in the beginning of what it is you're actually going to do and how
Yeah.
you're going to do it. And you also want a place to kind of house all that information. You can't really do that in a billion social posts because that stuff gets lost, right? It gets buried, it gets pushed down the timelines and off feeds and everything. And so, what we want to do is have a repository, have a home base to put all that info because you're going to meet somebody on the street, you're going to meet someone in a grocery store, at a networking event, and they're going to say, "Oh, well, tell me more about this specific part of what you do." And if you have a website and you have a page about that, you can just send them right to it, like
Hmm.
directly to that section, and they can get all the info they need. If you were like, "Oh, I think I posted it on Instagram like 6 months ago," they're not going to go and find that. They're going to just be like, whatever, never mind. And so having that website not only gives you that legitimacy, it gives you that credibility, but it also gives you this home base to kind of refer back to all the time. It also can give you a great way to set up a book a call session to get people interested, to get them talking to you. Because we all know that if you're a good entrepreneur and you're wanting to do this for real and you're really like on this, you're going to be a good salesperson. You're just going
Hmm.
to have to fight through it. You might not be good in the beginning, but you're going to eventually be a good salesperson. So if you can talk to somebody, you can probably sell them. And so having that option as well to say, hey, let's have a phone call, let's have a chat, video chat, whatever, that is going to give you that opportunity to sell somebody that maybe wouldn't have been a sale before that. And then once you've got the website, then I move on to social media because what is social media even supposed to do for you? It's supposed to reference the stuff you have on your website to get them to book a call, buy a product, set
Hmm.
up a time to be your coach or have you coach them or whatever. So there's all these reasons you would need a website to be this kind of home base and repository. Because if you just post things on social media, they, like I said, they get lost. So if you want to actually get sales, those sales don't happen on social media. They happen because of social media in some cases, but they don't happen actually on the platform. They happen on a website.
Yes, and then my question to you would be then, because a lot of times talk about content marketing, and for me, I was posting like a ton of videos, right? But then getting people to actually not only engage, but then people to follow through on the call to actions that you have placed. So how do you get them to kind of travel back to the website from the social media? A lot of time people just ramp out reels and ramp out all these different videos and things like that. And there's not a lot of return to get views, to get likes, but that doesn't translate into anything from there other more just more vanity metrics. So how do we get people
Yes.
to actually post things that get them back to the website?
So you're right about the vanity metrics. And so social media is not the only piece you can have. If you only had brand website social media, you're not going to go anywhere. You're going to
Mhm.
just walk in place, run in place. It's just nothing's going to happen. You have to then take that social media and you have to add it to possibly blogging. Some people are better at writing than speaking. So
Mhm.
blogging is a great option because that allows you to put more content on your website, get more SEO juice from that and then use that as social posts as well that bring people back to the website. The other piece I would say is really important is email marketing. Have that free thing on your website. I have two. So if you want to check those out and have that free thing on your site that allows people to put their email address in. Now you're building your list and you can then remind them of things. Hey, this is coming up. We only have 2 slots left. This tie is selling out, whatever. And so you can then use your email marketing to reinforce what your social is saying, what your blog is saying. And then the third piece or another piece of that, in addition to social media, would be podcasting. That's a huge SEO boost because of the backlinking. It's a huge boost for people who are really good at speaking or teaching. It gives them a platform to create these videos that is very little low cost to them that where they're a guest or have their own podcast that's even being pushed out to other types of viewers and other types of audiences. And again, more content for social media that it's, you don't have to create a new thing, right? It's already something you're
Yeah.
doing. You're already blogging, you're already podcasting, and you can just bring that content over. So I find that the consistency is what makes those people go to the website. It's what makes them book something. If you're not consistent, in all of those areas, in at least two or three of those things I mentioned, including social, blogging, email, and podcasting. If you're not consistent in at least two of those, you're not going to see that traction. And consistency could mean you do this for an entire year and then you start seeing something happen. But if you're doing all of those things, and like, for example, I'm out there teaching classes for free, allowing people to hear about me, to see what I'm doing. I work with a lot of organizations and do paid speaking as well. I speak to conferences. So I'm physically out in the world doing these things, even if it's online. That also helps bring that circle back around, bring people back through my cycle, back through my funnel. And all of that is what actually makes something successful. So there's never a time when I just set everything up and walk away. I'm actually setting everything up so I can go out in the world and physically do things in person with people or online with people while all those other things are running in the background, like social and email and things like
Yeah, I kind of want to go down the email marketing road because it's something that I've been realizing how important it is and something that I'm trying to go like as we speak. And so I want to ask you though, because usually when you get an email, there's some type of exchange, right? Not most people aren't just going to give you your email. You have to give them something in return. So can you, if you don't mind sharing, walk us through how you came up with your lead magnet, your free gift that you have, and what's something that, especially when someone just starting out a business, how do they create this free lead magnet so that they can start building up their email list? Because I didn't realize the importance of it until I think I started learning about like ClickFunnels and Russell Brunson, and that's when I understood that hey, I need to get this going. So I'm kind of late into building my email list, but I know the importance of it now, so I'm going after it now. But so like
that.
for anyone that doesn't know how to start building that free lead magnet, what kind of advice could you give us?
Well, I definitely say start it as early as you can, but whenever you start it is a good time because that means you're ready to start it. And one of the things I like to do with small businesses, when we do the branding day with someone, I actually help them build that lead magnet on that branding day because we already have a mindset of who are we, right? Who is this all for? Why are we doing this? And they're kind of sharing with me in that branding day their expertise, like why they're good at this job, why they're going to have this successful business. And in that sharing, they're kind of revealing some things to me that maybe I didn't know about their industry. Maybe I didn't know about how they run their business or that type of work that they do. And I can see things that say, that's a great checklist. Let's build a checklist around that. Or let's create a 5 things you should never do, or things you should ask a web designer before you hire them, right? And it can all lead to hiring that person, right? So I actually had for one of the home builders I worked with, we created a list that said, these are 10 things you should ask your roofer before you even hire them. And they did roofing inspections and they did roofing like jobs. And so they built this list because they knew that people don't know what to ask. That homeowner doesn't know. They don't know the first thing about roofs. They just know it's leaking or whatever. And so when they give them that list of questions to ask another company and that other company doesn't do so well on that test, then that homeowner knows maybe I should call this guy that gave me this list. Maybe he can
Mhm.
answer these questions. And so it does give them this kind of autonomy to say, here's something you can do on your own. Go have fun. I don't need anything from you. Maybe an email address. I mean, what is that? Nothing, no big deal,
Yeah.
right? But I just have fun. Take it. It's my free gift to you. But in turn, you've now gotten them into the mindset of this person helped me. This person gave me something no one else was talking about. So, for
Mhm.
example, my lead magnet is my Pro Toolkit. I would have people asking me all the time, what do you use for email marketing? What are you using for websites? What are you using for social scheduling? I mean, just the same 20 questions over and over. And I realized that was valuable information. So I put together a list of everything that I use. And if I stop using it, it gets taken off the list. So if I'm using it, it's on the list. If I use it for a client, it goes on the list. And so that list is constantly updated and revised. And I'm constantly checking those things to make sure they're still working, they're still good options. And so that's very valuable, not only for me to have that list to go back to myself, but for when someone says to me, what am I supposed to do next? Where do I go? I want to DIY this first. Have this free list. It's everything I use. You can use the same stuff. There's no proprietary thing to it. So that was a great option for me. Sometimes people just have a lot of videos that are really valuable. Sometimes they have a lot of PDFs or workbooks or whatever. I have a lot of that too. I put it all in the free library. You can go watch like 30 hours of stuff about
Yes.
me teaching all this stuff. So it's basically like you came to a class, but you could do it all at your own pace. So those are some great lead magnets that once you've started creating content, or even if you have no content, you can put together some kind of free, small, valuable item that that person who's looking for your service or your product is going to go, oh my gosh, this helped me so much. And it's going to help bring them back to you in the end.
Yeah, so I think a great question to ask now because I'm right now in the process of planning my virtual summit. And that for me is going to be a list builder. That is going to be, and I haven't shared this in the podcast yet, but for anyone that doesn't have a list, it's an amazing way to start. And for me, it's for the most part, I'm just learning about the more technical side of things of putting it together. But there's a website that I found that a software that kind of is for virtual summits. So that figuring that out isn't all that hard because it helps me develop it. But it's like for me, I have all these connections I have access to. And so I was like, you know what? I don't have a list and these people have lists.
Yeah.
I have a platform. How could I kind of provide some value? And for me, the value is putting something together. That is extremely valuable. And when people see, and this is why I love podcasting so much. And I think if it's not something that you plan, like out of the things you mentioned, I think podcast should be close to the top of things you start because podcasting, one, it gives you access to pretty much free one-on-one coaching, right? Because you get
Yes.
to interview people, right? And then you get to see how, what they learn. If you could just interview people in the industry that you want to start, let's say you're a roofer, or interview the top 10 roofers in the Northeast. And now it's like, you got to pick their brains, one, make
Yeah.
a good connection. Hopefully you build some rapport with them, two. And then three, if the connection is still going, they're more likely going to be willing to help you out. If they see that you are going after it, you're hustling, you're hungry, you're willing to do what it takes. Like for me, when I reached out to all my speakers, they were all like, yeah, of course, John. I said in the email, like, I haven't done this before, but I got this idea from a book and I ran it by my listeners and they think it would be a good idea. Is it something you'd be interested in? And although I didn't have everything put together, they all said yes. Like that first day, I probably got like 6 people to say yes. And so now it's like, I'm already building an audience right now. They already been on the podcast. Some of their episodes haven't dropped yet, but it's like, now it's like, okay, let me just put the guys all together for one day or like 2 days and do a virtual event. And then it's going to be free to attend. And then for me in the future, my lead magnet right now is just the unreleased podcast episode that I titled The Beginner's Guide to Entrepreneurship. But now my lead magnet in the future is going to be the replay to the virtual summit. And I'm still going to have it be free because there's a tactic called like, I'm evergreen it. So like, it looks like it's always a new summit. And so now it's like, it goes from a little bit of value to like a free virtual summit. Sheesh, with all these speakers and all these things and these free gifts, it's like now my lead magnet is going to be a lot more enticing and a lot more, people are going to be a lot more willing to exchange their email. Cause it's like before he was just giving me a little class, like webinar replay. And now
Right.
he's giving me all this, and this, this, and this. And like Russell Brunson talks about it, like the person who provides the most value wins, right? And so
Hmm.
it's like, that's massive value right there, a summit versus a webinar. And so that's kind of what I'm doing. But let me ask you now, once you build that list, whether it's from a lead magnet, a summit, whatever it may be, what do you do with it? Because getting it is not that hard. It's just, but maintaining people, retaining people, making sure they don't unsubscribe, making sure they actually click the links in your email. Like, how do you cultivate a good email list where you have actual, like, active subscribers and not just people that wanted your lead magnet and then kind of disappear?
Well, you're going to have the same thing that happens with social media. You're going to have the people who lurk that see but don't do, see but don't act. You're going to have the people that like but don't act. You're going to have the people that subscribe and unsubscribe from your list and do not act. But you're also going to have people, which I find this very fascinating, that are on your list and you've sent out an email, hey, we're doing this virtual summit. I'd love you to come to it, whatever, right? It's free. And they never even open it, but they'll see you in person and they'll say, hey, I heard you were doing this. I saw your email this morning. I didn't get a chance to open it, but. And the thing is, that is even as valuable as if they had opened it and clicked it, because now they just saw you. They remembered it, right? Out of
Mm-hmm.
all the emails they've gotten today or yesterday or whenever it was, they remembered that because they saw you. And so now what means that they're not going to remember that when they're talking to someone who's talking about podcasting or entrepreneurship or getting into it, they'll say, oh my gosh, there's this summit I just heard about. Let me go find that email. So even though they didn't even open it, just because you were consistent and you were there and you were sharing that message over and over, whether it was through social or email or whatever, then they're going to be more inclined to say, John's actually on top of it. He is actually consistently there. He's always saying the same things. He's never wavering in what he does. And I know that he's a good, consistent form of information that if either I or someone else needs it, I know exactly where to send them. I know exactly what they're going to get. And so that's a huge thing, is to even just be consistent in that. I send things out about classes I'm doing. So free classes through the SBA. I send out stuff about a new availability. So maybe I'm reducing my availability or if something has opened up. I send stuff out about technical things that are happening in the world. So there's a lot of legal stuff around websites and stuff right now that just kind of confusing. So I send out information about that sometimes. And sometimes I'll just do a sale, literally. Like I did one at the end of last year from September to December. And I said, I'm reducing my price back to 2019 pricing. And it's a recession pricing we're doing right now. And I had
Mhm.
so many people respond to that, doing multiple day sessions because the price was so reduced. And it didn't really bother me that it was reduced. I wanted to help those people. I knew they were in a crunch, especially during the end of last year with kind of things not going so well during the summer. And so it was really helpful for me to kind of use that as some leverage. And now those people who might not have been clients at all became clients and are kind of connected with me for a longer term now. So that kind of stuff is stuff you would send out in emails. I also sometimes just send out personal updates. And that's also really helpful too. I don't send those out quite a lot, maybe once a quarter or so,
Yeah.
but it's definitely something that people really engage with, even just replying to you and saying, hey, that's great news, or hey, I saw this. And then, of course, all the podcasts I've been on, I send an email about those. So whether I've put out a podcast of my own on my own podcast, or I've been on someone else's, every single one of those gets an email that goes out. And that's just more of that consistency. I've been on over 200 podcasts in the last 2 years. 140 of them were actually in 2020. And
Jeez.
just from one podcast, I actually made $15,000 from one podcast. But it was because of that consistency. It was because of allowing people to see that I wasn't going anywhere, right?
Yeah.
I was still saying the same things. I still had the same message. And if they needed that information and they needed that expertise, they knew exactly where to go.
No, I love that you mentioned that. And so me, like, just to share with you what I'm trying to do this year is I'm trying to be a guest on 400 podcasts. And so right now we're recording this in January. I have so far for the year so far, I think 40 already lined up. So I'm ahead of schedule. But like for me, the reason I'm going all in is because this year, I said this past year, I was super distracted. I was trying real estate. I was doing the social media stuff. I was doing the podcast. My podcast numbers were going down. I wasn't selling any houses. Didn't get clients from social media. I'm still at the restaurant job that I thought I was going to leave back in February. So it's like, and not February of 2023, February is 2022, right? And so it was like, why is nothing growing? And so like this year, I'm coming in with a whole lot of intentionality about growing the podcast and doing everything it takes to grow and make up for all the lost focus that I
Mhm.
had in 2022. And so it's like now it's like I can't expect full-time results from part-time effort. So I'm going overtime to make up and kind of to what you're doing, just going on like a podcast here and just being a guest on as many shows as I can to build my list, build my name, build my authority, build my audience up and just kind of doing that. You mentioned a point too that kind of brought me to something that you said earlier. And you mentioned earlier about the point of we have to be able to repel people. But you also mentioned here that you didn't mind because you wanted to help people. And sometimes entrepreneurs have they call that the Myth America effect that, oh, I want to help everyone. Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do you kind of navigate that and also like also niching down? And I know it's a kind of a turn random term, but like it kind of made me think about the earlier point because as I said, when we get into this, a lot of the people that get into entrepreneurship, sometimes it's because I just want some money, but some people are actually getting into entrepreneurship for like noble causes. But it's like
Yeah.
you also have to run a business. So it's like, how do you
Yeah.
like tread that line?
So the way that I do that is all the other times of the year, I am like super hardlined.
Yeah.
There are no discounts. There is no help. There are no options. The price is the price. The service is the service. You can't make some customized craziness Frankenstein out of it. No. The only thing that I offer during the year for the most part is the price is the price. Here are the payment terms. Or I'll sometimes, very rarely, if I really feel magnanimous about it, I'll offer a payment plan and I'll split the payment. I'll do like a huge deposit and I'll split the rest of the payment up over like 6 months or something. But
Mhm.
that's something that I only offer to specific people that I really feel like are going to be able to handle that and actually sustain. But for the most part, it's every time other in the year, it's like, okay, this is the price. If you don't like it, then you're not for me, and that's fine. But there are some times of the year when you get to this point where you say, I've been doing well, or I've done okay, or maybe I'm not even doing well at all. It just depends on the time of day and the time of year. And you just say, you know what? I'd rather make something than nothing. Or you say, I don't really need right now. And so I'm going to lower the bar a little bit. I'm going to open up a little bit. And it's not that the clients were different. They were still the same type of client, still that niche client that I look for, but they were maybe not in my normal price point. And so by giving myself a time frame, September to December, December 31st, that was it. No
Yeah.
more at that price. Nobody could, oh, I had to reschedule and hold over. If you reschedule into January, it's the regular price. And I had one lady come in on December 27th and 28th. She wanted to get in that bad. She was like, I have to work with you. And so I let her do that, which that was more than my week off, but I helped her out. And she flew across country to come see me and we worked it and we got her stuff done and she's very happy with it. And so, but that was a time frame. As of yesterday or 2 days ago, it's January 1st, it's one of those things where I'm like, the price is the price. And I've had people call me and plead and beg and, oh, you had this price and it was so great. I should have done it. I'm sorry. And so I kind of go back to my mean self,
Yeah.
but that's where you're running a business and you have to make sure that you're taking care of yourself, taking care of your family, and also taking care of the business needs as well. It's almost like another person, right? And so there's just these times where you can say, this is the time limit, give it a container and let the container be the bad guy. It's only available for 2 months. It's only available for 30 days, whatever
Yeah.
that is. And that's the policy. That's what the business said. And so kind of let the container be the bad guy, but also you're kind of opening up a little bit and then helping people out at the same time.
Yeah, that's amazing advice. And a lot of times we discount ourselves, and it's like you're not only discounting yourself, you're also discounting all the people that rely on you and that you're supporting as well, because that's money coming out of your pocket
Yeah.
that is supposed to be going towards all the things that you're paying for in your life. And you still have to maintain not only the business, as you said way back in the beginning, but you have to maintain your lifestyle as well. So be careful with discounting yourself, because if you provide that value, provide the transformation, that service, you deliver on your experience, people will come with their credit cards running, right? So, uh,
Yes.
Elizabeth, you dropped a ton of gems this entire episode. Where can we find you at? Where can we connect with you at? If we want to either wanted the free gift or just wanted to see what more about what you got going on.
You can go to getabsolutemarketing.com and there is a free page. And that's where I have the Pro Toolkit and the free library. But you can also just book a chat with me. I'm happy to chat with anybody, even if you're not in my price range right now. That's
Mm,
fine too. I'm happy to answer any questions. I do a free 15-minute consultation with anybody who wants.
amazing. And so now it's time for I'm still thinking of a name. I can't think of a name yet, but for that, because I added an extra question. And so I can't think of a name. But nevertheless, the last five questions that we ask every guest, I'm still thinking of a name. It'll come to me. I had one for when it was four, but now that it's five, I got to think of a new name to make it
Well,
catchy
it's the
and roll
Fast
out.
Five, right?
I guess Fast Five, but that's like everyone. That's like, for lack of a better name right now, I'll say Fast Five. I'll think of something. I would say the Fab Five or I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know. I'll think about it. But question number one is, what is the most impactful lesson that you've learned in life?
Perseverance.
What is the most admirable trait that a person can have?
The most animal trait?
Admirable, sorry.
Admirable. Oh, admirable.
Yeah.
I would definitely say honesty.
If you had to change someone's life with one book, which book would you recommend?
Profit first.
What is the legacy that you're trying to leave behind?
That anybody can do this.
And no matter where someone is right now on their walk to wealth, what is the first step that you recommend they take to get to where they want to get to?
Make sure you can break even.
Amazing. Elizabeth, it was a pleasure interviewing you. I had a blast. I definitely took a lot away. As I said, a lot of things you're talking about is kind of like what I'm going through right now and trying to figure out right now. So I definitely personally was able to take a lot away. So I know the listeners would definitely get a lot from this episode. So thanks again for hopping on and sharing some of your wisdom, your experience, and your expertise.
Thank you so much for having me.